As part of our bulletin, you've seen quite a number of stories of conflict, terrorism attacks, and quite indeed a lot that is happening in the continent. There's a situation in Burundi. We're closely following what is going to happen in the Gambia, with Yahya Jammeh saying he will not relinquish power to Adama Barrow, calling ECOWAS efforts to bring in a standby force, should he refuse to do so, an act of war. Quite a bit of conflict is happening, not just in the continent, but in the world as well. Let's talk a little bit about this with Daniel Juma, who's from the Global Peace Foundation on Peace and Security. Yes. Thank you, Daniel, for making the time, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me.
Great. So you take a look at all of these situations, on the continent, what's happening in the Gambia. Burundi is something that, for some reason, I have a very personal relationship with, for whatever it is. Yes. But there's quite a number of situations on the continent and in the world that make us worry. Yes. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can say that actually as the year began, with the new UN Secretary General saying that let's make 2017 be the year of peace. There's quite a lot of work cut out for the Secretary General, for the UN, and for everybody else, and especially, us in Africa. As you know, Africa has been the continent that actually undergoes a lot of violence, conflicts. And I think if you look at what's going on in Gambia, if you look at what's going on in South Sudan, Burundi, the other day we had Central African Republic. Yeah. So we're dealing with so much. And I think it's time for African leaders to really get serious. Okay. Get serious and really search their own souls and decide on where do we want to go, what kind of legacy they want to leave Africa.
So let's talk about the role of Africa, and we'll talk about Antonio Guterres' message, the United Nations chief, in a moment. But closer home, do you think regional organizations like the African Union have done enough? I mean, we've seen what ECOWAS is doing in Gambia and taking a very bold step and making a very bold statement. But some feel that, the AU is quiet. By the way, we're yet to hear an official statement from the AU regarding what happens in Gambia. Even in Burundi, we keep talking about a standby force. We're not quite ready to do so. But what are your thoughts on the work of the AU?
I think I must applaud ECOWAS for standing by the people of Gambia. You can see, what President Yahya Jammeh is trying to do in the Gambia basically is a violation of the rights of the people. The poor people of Gambia, just the poor people of any part of Africa, the only power they hold is the vote. And that vote has to be able to count. So, but unfortunately for AU, we have been really observing AU, and during the time that we had the problem in Cote d'Ivoire, where we had Jinping was the chair of AU, and you can see how he basically handled the whole situation. He was left alone. So we are saying that as African leaders, when you're given a job to do, do it. Do it with all your best ability, and also knowing that one day it's going to be you who really needs, that kind of services. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, doing a good job, and the shoes on the other foot now. So we want to listen to the new United Nations chief Antonio Guterres, who's pledged to make 2017 a year to, quote, put peace first. I'd like you to listen to his New Year message.
Yes.
As Secretary General of the United Nations, one question weighs heavily on my heart. How can we help the millions of people caught up in conflict, suffering massively in wars with no end in sight? Civilians are pounded with deadly force. Women, children and men are killed and injured, forced from their homes, dispossessed and destitute. And even hospitals and aid convoys are targeted. No one wins these wars. Everyone loses. Trillions of dollars are spent destroying societies and economies, fueling cycles of mistrust and fear that can last for generations. And whole regions are destabilized, and the new threat of global terrorism affects us all. On this New Year's Day, I ask all of you to join me in making one shared New Year's resolution. let us resolve to put peace first. Let us make 2017 a year in which we all, citizens, governments, leaders, strive to overcome our differences. From solidarity and compassion in our daily lives, to dialogue and respect across political divides, from ceasefires on the battlefield, to compromise at the negotiating table to reach political solutions. Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us. And I appeal to you all to join me in committing to peace today and every day. Let us make 2017 a year for peace.
Okay, so it sounds very idealistic.
Yeah.
Sounds utopia. It's great. Peace is good, and peace starts with you and me. And he has stated the problem. Is it as simple as saying, this is my New Year message?
Yeah.
What are some of those nuts and bolts that he can do that would ensure peace around the world like he wants it?
Yeah, I think, you know, his message is kind of, and basically, Antonio Guterres, the Portuguese diplomat, many people are hoping that he's going to be one of the best UN Secretary Generals. And as you rightfully said, you can no longer afford to give it just a lip service. We have to get down to work. Let's look at what is the problem with the world today. If you come back to Africa, basically the biggest problem with the conflicts in Africa, the trigger is basically elections.
Yeah.
You can see
the
in Gambia.
political conflicts, yes.
And you can see what happened in Kenya in 2007, 2008.
Right.
You can see what happened in Burundi, where the president forced a third term. You know, this is the problem. And I think we need to learn from history. I think African leaders must be humble enough to know that leadership is about the people, not them. But right now, the political class in Africa, and that's why some people blame the AU sometimes, is because the elite, the leaders, you know, when they're together, they actually don't think about the people.
There are some good examples, though, in Africa with what's happened in Ghana and in Nigeria. I mean, Goodluck Jonathan was a one-term president and handed over to Muhammadu Buhari, you know, with no issues whatsoever. So what are those lessons that we can learn from within? Because it's clear we're not short of that, at least.
I think they need, I mean, just like he said, that nobody wins these wars. You know, the leaders are better placed if they can retire in a peaceful country. For example, Burundi. This guy, you know, when he leaves power, you know, he would love to retire into a peaceful Burundi, right? But he doesn't think about that. So I think we have a long way to go. And if you see what happened in Libya, the uprising in Libya, basically showed you that none of these leaders can last forever. You can never last forever.
That's right. So now we're focusing a little bit, and we'll come back home because we're in a similar situation as we head to August 2017. But when you take a look at some of these world conflicts, proxy wars in Syria, Russia versus the US. Do you think Antonio Guterres has the mettle, has what it takes, you know, to face some of these countries head on? Because there's activity by both sides, the US and Russia, and what's happening there. And then there's another gentleman in North Korea who's doing all sorts of tests with missiles, saying he has a missile that can reach all the way to the coast of the United States. I mean, do you think this is the man who has what it takes to bring all of these leaders, especially the big boys, because they cannot be absolved of blame altogether?
I think he doesn't have a choice. He has to do his job, you know, because if you see what is happening in Syria, Syria should not have been allowed to go the way it went.
More than 5 years,
Yes, and it's still going on. And, and I blame, of course, the leadership. The UN should have been more emphatic. And also the big powers, the US.
But the US is in it. They're funding the rebels. You know, Russia is on the side of Bashar al-Assad.
Yesterday, when I saw what's going on in North Korea, when Kim Jong-un said he is now a nuclear and military power, I sent a tweet to Portus. I said, how could you let that happen under your reign? How could you let North Korea say they have, you know, nuclear capability? So I think Guterres must reset the whole diplomacy. It's about diplomacy.
Good.
Yeah,
Let's
yes.
talk about diplomacy a little
Yes,
bit, because
yes.
the man who's about to take over
Yes.
the helm of the world superpower, the United States, Donald Trump, has reacted to just the situation you are describing.
Yeah.
Now, in that reaction, of course, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump said that North Korea would not complete a nuclear weapon capable of reaching the United States. He vowed on Twitter that, quote, it will not happen. North Korea leader, of course, Kim Jong-un, said on Sunday the isolated nuclear-capable country was close to test launching an intercontinental ballistic missile. So let's listen to what he had to say.
Okay.
친애하는 동지들.
Research and development of cutting-edge arms equipment is actively progressing, and ICBM rocket test launch preparation is in its last stage.
첨단 무장 장비 연구 개발 사업이
We
활발히
have to put an end to the invasion and interference of the US and foreign countries for conquering the Asia-Pacific through South Korea, and we must smash activities of slavish anti-unification traitors like Park Geun, who is unable to distinguish the real enemy and finding ways to survive in the confrontation of the same race.
와 같은 반통일 사대 매국 세력이 준동을 분쇄.
All right, so Daniel, you're talking about diplomacy.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, president-elect, is not known for that, and is going up against this gentleman we've just seen, who's just as forthright.
Yeah. Now, I think Donald Trump, when he takes over the presidency, will have to learn that these are not things we just tweet about. You know, he has to get more serious with that. And we have to give him the benefit of doubt that actually he can be able to do it. So I think we are looking at the team he's putting together. We are hoping that team will actually get to work and lead the world. The U.S. is the most powerful nation on earth. They have to provide leadership. Letting the world, collapse, like what happened in Somalia, what's happening in and in Syria. The U.S. cannot afford to let countries collapse.
But yet the person at the helm of the U.S. now is a man known for nationalism. And I think that's a wave that's happening around the world. Donald Trump coming to the helm of the United States, as he did, preaching a lot of nationalism, inward-looking, not just there, Brexit as well. Lots of European countries. At the time when Brexit just happened, there was talk of a possible Frexit, and a number of other countries thinking of, less of globalization and more of nationalism. Does the UN then have a space? The UN is supposed to be this global sort of conglomeration of nations, and now everybody's saying that whole globalization isn't working for us. Your thoughts on globalization versus nationalism, and how that affects peace and conflict and security in the world?
I think when it comes to nationalism, of course, rightfully so, to be able to win the elections, Donald Trump had to use that card. Of course, we have Americans. The problem of unemployment is there in the U.S. So he had to appeal to the voters. And of course, the voters wanted a president who wants to solve their problems in-house before going outside. But then the U.S. has to lead. And of course, I think Donald Trump will learn, shortly that you cannot afford to leave, to abdicate your duty, and the moment you do that, then some of these problems, like you can see what's happening in the immigration. When the EU and the first world, basically ignored what's going on in Syria. We had influx of immigrants going into Europe.
So if you don't solve their problem, it becomes
will become your problem eventually. So I'm thinking, if you look at the issue of North Korea, for me, my view, and as a view of the Global Peace Foundation, is that we need Because North Korea and South Korea is basically one nation. We need to encourage North Korea and South Korea to unite.
Do you think that's possible? Listen to what he said about Kim, about Park Geun-hye.
Yeah. I mean, these guys are basically, they're from the same family.
That's true.
And they speak one language. The only problem was basically ideological. We had basically North moving away with the communism, and South Korea remaining with capitalism. But like my president said, my boss always says that actually if North and South Korea decides to unite, it's going to be one of the most ineffective superpowers in the world today.
All right, so let's bring this home now, because somewhere in our conversation, you talked about a lot of the conflict in Africa being politically driven and always arising from an election. We've seen this before. We're going into that season now. We're smack in the middle of it, actually. You know, what are your thoughts then on that? And I know the Global Peace Foundation is doing something around peace messaging at this time. You could tell us about that.
Yes. So basically, I mean, even this morning I was following up what's going on in the Senate. Last week I was in the Senate, and you know, we are back again, you know, talking about, you know, the laws that were amended. And of course, you are aware that, you know, the laws basically were agreed upon, election laws, and suddenly, again, Parliament decided to change that. We have to be intellectually honest. In the time when you are approaching an election, you know, you cannot, of course, the Jubilee administration, they are free to run the country. They can make, you know, they can buy SGR, they can do whatever they want to do. But when it comes to election, I think as the president, you have to demonstrate that you can be trusted to deliver free, fair, and credible elections. And that's where now we are hoping that the president will, you know, put on his statesman hat and tell the Kenyan people that you can trust me, that I'm serious about credible elections. And I think there's a lot of discussion going on. Is it just about peace? I mean, we have been blamed sometimes that we're trying to message peace, you're not looking at justice, you're not looking at credibility.
And you're smack in the middle of a campaign like that. So are you telling us, Daniel, to close our eyes and say peace, peace, peace? No matter, you know, what happens at the ballots, there's a lot of conversation around.
No, basically what we're saying, that the IBC should be able, and the state should be able to encourage the IBC to deliver credible elections. And what we're saying in our National Peace Initiative, that there is a nexus between credible election and peaceful election. Those two go hand in hand. I do not think that if truly the elections are conducted in a free, transparent, and credible manner, I don't think Kenyans will fight. I think Kenyans are tired of fighting. You have seen the business community always complaining, oh, they don't want demonstrations. Everyone is complaining. So I think that we need to listen to that voice, and the state must deliver its promise of a credible elections. Otherwise, if that doesn't happen, then we may need to again go back to history, which we don't want to go back to. So what we are saying is that we need to change our political culture. We need to civilize our politics in this country. You know, our politics is the kind of politics that always takes us hundreds and hundreds of years before. So we are saying that as we go through towards the coming elections, the political class should know that politics and the coming elections is not just about the 20% political class. It must be about the 80%, the people. What does the people say? And going about this, I'll give you an example of Korea. You saw the other day, the president of Korea. He's one of the, you know, I always give my examples. You know, when the president of Korea had something going on that the people didn't trust, there were demonstrations, and parliament impeached her. You get my point? That puts the people on the helm. That if you are leading, you have to know that you are leading on behalf of the people.
And so if they no longer trust you, then you lose.
Then you have to. And then we are saying that whatever happened to accountability in this country, whatever, if the people say they want this, why don't you just give it to them? And we learned from history, you know, when President Moi, you know, had the, you know, basically when he was in power, he was a strong man, you know, and at some point, he allowed the IPPG to basically set the rules for the election, and he still won. and he won again. So our campaign is basically non-political, non-partisan. We want to basically bring both parties together and say that can we apply the golden rule? Like right now we have the opposition and the state is in power and the opposition. So what if we change roles? Would you still have the same rules?
All right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective to leave it at there and some food for thought. Thank you very much, Daniel Juma from the Global Peace Foundation, saying there is a nexus between a credible and a peaceful election, and the two go hand in hand. And our discussion, not just on what's happening in Kenya, but on global peace and security issues. Daniel Juma, thank you for your time. You're watching Worldview. We want to give